The Soviet base Mirny 12 lay lost in the absolute whiteness of Antarctica, where the wind screamed like a wounded animal and the cold possessed the power to shatter bones. There, in 1983, a team of scientists received orders to drill through the ice until they reached Lake Vostok, a body of water sealed off from the surface for millions of years. The promise was one of unprecedented scientific discoveries, but no one spoke of what might happen if something else was found down there, something that had been waiting in that frozen darkness, undisturbed, perhaps since before humanity took its first breath. The lake had been hidden beneath 2 miles of ice, a secret kept by nature itself, and now these men were about to break that ancient seal. The drilling began with metallic sounds that mingled with the roar of the storms. The ice seemed to resist as if it were alive, creaking and vibrating with each meter conquered. Geologist Ivan Petrov claimed to hear sounds coming from the deep layers, something like distant beats, measured almost like a heart trapped beneath tons of ice. He would press his ear against the walls of the drill shaft during his shifts, listening to that rhythm that shouldn't exist, that couldn't exist. The other scientists dismissed his concerns as exhaustion, the mind playing tricks in that endless white void. But Ivan knew what he heard, and deep down, so did they. The sound grew stronger each day, more insistent, as if whatever lay below was growing impatient. On the 7th day, the sonar detected movement. The screen flickered, and a colossal form emerged, displacing the water beneath the lake. The technician in charge believed it to be a reading error, but when he rebooted the system, the silhouette remained there, slow, pulsating, as if breathing. The coordinates indicated something over 130 feet in length. Commander Sergei ordered absolute silence about the incident. The government could not know about a possible unidentified organism until they had proof. That night, the scientists slept restlessly, and the sensors registered micro-vibrations as if the ice beneath their feet was moving. Some swore they could feel it through their bunks, that subtle tremor that spoke of something immense stirring in the depths, something that knew they were there. When diver Alexei descended through the borehole, the water was so dark it looked like ink. He was secured by a cable and equipped with reinforced oxygen tanks. The communication was irregular, filled with static. For a moment, everyone heard a confused phrase, almost whispered, in Alexei's voice, but not quite his tone. And then silence. A silence so complete it seemed to swallow sound itself. 30 minutes of tension passed until the cable began to move on its own, jerking upward with a force that seemed impossible. They pulled him back with trembling hands, each member of the team knowing something had gone terribly wrong down there in that ancient water, in that place where light had never touched. Alexei was hauled back, his body shaking, his eyes dilated to impossible proportions. When they removed him from the suit, he was muttering guttural sounds without meaning, in a language no one recognized. The base doctor tried to calm him, but the diver only stared at the ceiling and began to laugh. A laugh that seemed to come from somewhere else, from something else wearing Alexei's face like a mask. The sound echoed through the metal corridors, bouncing off the walls in ways that defied acoustics. It was a laugh that carried with it the weight of ages, of depths unfathomable, of things that should have remained buried beneath the ice forever. His fellow scientists backed away, unable to meet his eyes. In the early morning hours that followed, the pressure inside the laboratory began to drop. The oxygen systems failed inexplicably, and the ice on the walls seemed to expand, as if the very air was freezing solid. Security cameras showed a form emerging from the lake opening, transparent, fluid, but with visible eyes. Countless eyes that moved independently within that mass. The creature seemed to absorb the light around it, creating pockets of darkness that spread like oil across water. The alarms blared, and the generator began to fail, lights flickering in rhythm with that same heartbeat Ivan had heard in the ice. The voices over the speakers distorted, repeating phrases Alexei had muttered. syllables without translation, but which caused instant headaches, as if the sounds themselves were weapons designed to break the human mind. Sergei tried to organize an evacuation, but the metal doors were frozen from the inside, sealed by ice that shouldn't have been able to form in a heated facility. The windows began to cover themselves with a thin layer of frost that grew in geometric patterns, as if obeying some unknown logic, some mathematics from beyond our reality. The patterns were beautiful and terrible, spiraling inward in ways that hurt to look at directly. Through the frosted glass, they could see shapes moving in the darkness outside. Or were they reflections of what was already inside with them? The distinction no longer seemed to matter, because the boundary between the base and the frozen wasteland beyond was dissolving, and with it, their understanding of what was real and what was impossible. Scientist Yuri attempted to analyze samples of the water brought back by Alexei. Beneath the microscope, something moved with deliberate intention. Microstructures that seemed to react to light, pulsing and contracting, forming symbols when exposed to sounds. Patterns that repeated and evolved, as if learning, adapting. It was as if there existed a language within the water itself, a consciousness distributed through millions of microscopic entities working in perfect coordination. Yuri spent hours photographing the formations, his hands trembling as he adjusted the focus, watching these impossible things arrange themselves into characters he felt he should recognize but couldn't quite grasp. He muttered to himself about ancient texts, about languages that predated human civilization, about things that communicated through means science had yet to discover. Hours later, Yuri vanished without a trace. The laboratory was found empty, sterile in its silence, but his clothes lay folded neatly beside a puddle that boiled slowly despite the freezing temperature of the room. Steam rose in lazy spirals, carrying with it a scent that no one could identify. Something organic yet alien, like the smell of the ocean mixed with ozone, and something else, something that made the nose burn and the eyes water. The security camera footage showed his shadow stretching across the floor, elongating in ways that defied the light source, distorting and twisting until it separated from his body entirely and disappeared into the darkness of the corner. His body followed moments later, walking stiffly toward that same corner, and then simply ceasing to exist, as if reality had decided he no longer belonged. The ice continued climbing up the walls with inexorable patience, covering the instruments, the computers, the bodies of those who had collapsed from exhaustion or terror or something worse. The temperature plummeted even with the heating system running at maximum capacity, the gauges showing readings that should have been impossible. Negative numbers that shouldn't exist outside theoretical physics. Alexei, in one of the recordings, was seen pressing his face against the frozen wall, his breath creating no fog, and whispering something in that same unknown language he'd brought back from the depths. His lips moved in patterns too complex, too rapid for human speech, as if multiple voices were speaking through his mouth simultaneously. Shortly after, part of the ice cracked open from within, revealing an enormous eye behind the surface. An eye that should not have fit in the space available, that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the three they could perceive. It blinked slowly, the pupil dilating and contracting as it focused on each person in turn, studying them with an intelligence that was ancient and hungry. The remaining scientists tried desperately to destroy the drilling tunnel, to seal whatever was coming through, but the explosive charges failed to detonate, the detonators clicking uselessly in their trembling hands. When the creature approached, moving through the ice itself, as if it were nothing more than air, the radios captured human voices, mixed with the sounds of something submerged, something vast. They were echoes of their own conversations, repeated in inverted order, as if time itself was folding in on itself within that cursed place. Words spoken days ago emerged from the static, answered by words not yet uttered, creating dialogues that looped and spiraled into madness. One of the technicians began writing compulsively, his hand moving across paper so fast it tore through the pages, registering symbols that resembled Sumerian alphabets mixed with mathematical formulas that made no sense yet felt somehow correct. He claimed they were speaking through the water, teaching something, sharing knowledge that humanity was never meant to possess. His eyes gleamed with a fevered light as he scribbled faster and faster, blood seeping from his nose, his ears. Shortly after, his skin began to crack like drought-stricken earth, and underneath, they could see crystalline structures forming, his flesh transforming into something between organic tissue and mineral. The final records show the team attempting to escape through the communications antenna access, while the ice consumed the corridors behind them, moving faster than any natural process, driven by something with purpose and will. The creature, now partially visible in the flickering emergency lights, moved like a liquid veil, undulating through the air. And ice with equal ease, with eyes that opened and closed in silence throughout its body. Dozens of them, hundreds perhaps, each one reflecting human faces that belonged to no one living. Some of the faces were recognizable, crew members long dead, or perhaps not dead at all, but trapped somewhere between states of being. The last transmission shows the base covered by a thin layer of ice, perfectly smooth and almost beautiful in its completeness. But the most disturbing detail is not the freezing itself, not the way the metal twisted and the walls buckled. It is the movement beneath that translucent surface. The bodies appeared to move slowly, deliberately, opening their eyes within the ice as if awakening from a long sleep. Their mouths moving in silent speech, their fingers reaching towards something only they could see. They were not dead. They were changing, becoming something else, something that could exist in that frozen state, that could thrive in conditions that would kill any earthly organism. Weeks later, a Russian satellite detected a new formation at the site that defied all geological explanation. A perfect hexagonal structure had emerged from the ice, radiating inverse heat, a thermal anomaly that cooled everything around it, creating a zone where entropy seemed to run backward, where heat flowed toward cold instead of away from it. The structure pulsed with a rhythm that matched the heartbeat Ivan had first heard in the ice, now amplified and broadcast across frequencies that interfered with satellite communications across the entire continent. No rescue was sent because there was nothing to rescue, or perhaps because those who saw the satellite images understood that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. In the classified files of the Soviet Union, there exists only a brief note about the incident, stamped with red ink and buried beneath decades of bureaucracy and deliberate forgetting. The ice speaks, and to this day, in the winds that scour Antarctica's frozen wastes, they say you can hear a sound carried across the glaciers. It is not the sound of cold, nor the roar of the storms that batter that forsaken continent. It is the sound of something breathing beneath the ice, ancient and patient, waiting for mankind to return and drill once more. Because it knows we will. Curiosity is both our greatest gift and our most terrible curse, and there are things in the deep places of the world that understand this about us better than we understand ourselves. They wait in the darkness beneath the ice, in the crushing depths of lightless waters, and they have learned to be patient. Because they know that eventually, inevitably, we will come back to them. Tentar novamente o Claude pode cometer erros. Confira sempre as respostas. Sonnet 4.5